So this is the fourth and last lesson about the Roman Empire. So in this last lesson we are going to talk about the Roman Empire of the East. Roman Empire of the East is the Byzantine Empire, and the Byzantine Empire was founded in the 330 after Christ. We are after Christ now, and it fell in the 1453 after Christ. Well, a lot after the Middle Age. 1453, let's not forget that in Europe is almost the Renaissance. We are in the Renaissance, the beginning of the Renaissance in Europe. So this is a legendary empire because it lasts more than 1000 years with all the enemies that they have, and we will see why they were able to last for so long. First of all, let's see how the Byzantine Empire was created. The Byzantine Empire was created by the Roman emperor. So we had this Roman emperor that was Diocletian. Diocletian in Italian is called Diocleziano, and so in English I think Diocletian. I hope I pronounce it right. So Diocleziano was, I say the Italian way, or Latin, in Latin is Diocletianus. So Diocletiano was an emperor in Rome, the Rome of the West that we all know. Why this emperor decided to divide the Roman Empire in two? Because we know Rome was extremely expansionistic for the reason that we saw in the other lessons. And so at some point the Roman Empire became so huge, so vast, that it was logistically difficult to just administer all those lands. Let's not forget that those lands were populated by different people with different costumes, different cultures, different religions, and different languages. So that's what it makes even more difficult. There were a lot of land, immense, huge territories all across Europe and around the Mediterranean Sea until the coast of Africa and the Middle East until Syria. It wasn't only huge, it was not homogeneous, because like we said, the Romans conquered many different people belonging to many different cultures. So it was really hard to rule on such a vast and not homogeneous empire. So because of that, in order to facilitate the logistic, to rule, to control of those territories, Diocletianus decided to divide the Roman Empire. So Diocletianus kept the Roman Empire of the West with the capital Rome, and he gave the Roman Empire of the East, territory of the East, to a governor. He wasn't an emperor yet, he was a governor. He was Maximianus, Maximian. So this division is what originated the Roman Empire of the East, because then the Roman Empire of the East began to detach from Rome and acquire a life of its own. It became the Byzantine Empire with capital Byzantium, and later on the name of the capital will be changed to Constantinople in honor to the first emperor, Constantine, that was a great emperor, and he basically built all the city of Constantinople, follow the model of the city of Rome in Italy. So we have the beginning of the Byzantine Empire. It was created with this division in the 330, and it fell when in Europe we are at the beginning of the Renaissance in 1453. It has been conquered by who? By the Turks. So Byzantium originally was an ancient Greek colony that was founded in the 7th century before Christ. No, that's a typo, it's before Christ. And it took its name from the king Byzas, that it was this Greek king that founded this colony. In the 299, Diocletian divided the Roman Empire, like I said, and gave the west to the governor Maximian. So the real Byzantine Empire started a little bit later, because this division originated the Byzantine Empire, but it's not the moment that Byzantine Empire started to live on his own. 299 is just the division. The real origin of the Byzantine Empire as an independent empire started a little bit later. So the Byzantine Empire was strategically located on the Strait of Bosphorus. It was in a very strategically good position. The small stretch, so Strait of Bosphorus is the small stretch of sea that connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Sea of Marmara, that was an internal sea, and in making the border, it made basically the border, it was the passage between Asia and Europe. It was strategical, a very strategical position. That's also why the Byzantine Empire became extremely rich, because being in this position just at the borderline between Europe and Asia, it could control all the trades between the West and the East, and so of course it charged taxes on all the boats and all the merchants that bought and sold merchandise between the West and the East. That's what made the Byzantine Empire extremely rich. Here we see the division, okay, and in red was Diocletianus, and instead the territories in purple was the territories of the Roman Empire of the East. Then originated, it was basically Byzantium and the Byzantine Empire. This is a curiosity. Sometimes the adjective Byzantine in English is used to describe something that is decadent and complicated, excessively detailed, and even ambiguous. So the Byzantine Empire, however, preserved and handed down in the course of its 1,000-year history the rich cultural and juridical heritage of the Western world. It contributed to the affirmation of Christianity and influenced the modern world with its culture. So it's basically, the Byzantine Empire is the ancestors of the Western civilization, and is a mix between the Roman Empire and the Greeks. In fact, the official language of the Byzantine Empire later on ceased to be Latin and it became Greek. Also is very important for the affirmation of Christianity. In fact, the first great emperor of the Byzantine Empire, that was Constantine, was a Christian king. Let's see immediately Constantine. Constantine's from 280 to 337 after Christ. So the rise of Byzantium, or the Byzantine Empire, began with the first emperor, that was Constantine. At this time, the Byzantine Empire is still dependent by Rome, but later on, Constantine is dependent by Rome because Rome in Italy is the center. Rome in Italy was the center of the world, and Byzantium was a small city. It couldn't offer the kind of life that Rome offered. It didn't have enough construction, it didn't have enough building, it didn't have aqueducts, it couldn't provide water, it didn't have enough street way to communicate with the rest of the empire. It was just peripheric, it was a small city. So it's still dependent by Rome, the center of the world, the center of the empire is still Rome. So later on, when Constantine will rebuild the city, this emperor wanted to move the center of the life from Rome to Byzantium. Why? Because he was tired of the politics, the plots to assassinate each other. The aristocrats in Rome became extremely corrupted. It was always a fight for the power, and Constantine was tired of that. He wanted to start anew. He wanted a fresh start. That's why he worked so hard to build Byzantium similar to Rome. He built a lot of the temples, forums, aqueducts. He built actually all the city, and the city of Byzantium became large, big, beautiful like Rome, and it started to attract a lot of people. At some point, it surpassed Rome. It became even more important of Rome. So Constantine was called with the title of Great because of all his achievements. He has been a very good emperor. At the end of the 324 after Christ, after 20 years of power, struggle for power, Constantine took over the power of the whole Roman Empire. So Constantine took over the power. There was no, it was ruling all over the empire. Constantine reunited the Eastern and the Western Roman Empire, and he ruled over both. Okay, so later on, he started to rebuild Byzantium, that was the initial name of the capital of the Byzantine Empire, and when he finished to build this new city, this city was called Constantinople in his honor, because he totally built the city. Constantine moved the vital center of the Roman Empire in today's Turkey. You know why I say today Turkey? Is because at the end the Byzantine Empire have been conquered by the Turks. I'm sorry to spoil you the surprise, but yes. In fact, you know, nowadays, the city of Constantinople is Istanbul in Turkey. So, at that time, Constantine moved the vital center of the Roman Empire from Rome to Byzantium. Why he did that? Because he wanted a new city, far from the Roman aristocracy and its political rivalries. Let's don't forget the aristocracy that was represented by the Senate in Rome killed a lot of people. It's not only famous people like Julius Caesar, but they killed everybody that they didn't like, they took away their power. It was really corrupted and violent, and Constantine wanted to get away from all this. How to blame him? Constantine ordered the construction of the forums. They were very important, and the theaters, all the building typical of ancient Rome. He copied the architecture of ancient Rome that, don't forget, it came from the Greek architecture, and he used the techniques of construction of the Etruscans, using the same technique of construction developed by the ancient Romans, with a difference because in the area where there was the Byzantine Empire, in that area there are earthquakes. So they had to deal with that. In fact, they changed a little bit the technique of construction that were typical of the ancient Romans in order to make the building more flexible to absorb the seismic waves of that area. So Constantine, this is another thing very important about Constantine. Constantine changed the course of history. Why? Because the Romans were pagans. This is the first emperor that sided with Christianity. He wanted his empire to be Christian. And let's see, there are many reasons. Probably one, he was sincerely a Christian, but there are other reasons that are more political. Constantine was the first Christian emperor, and he had many churches built in his new capital. He built many churches. We will see later on the church of Saint Sophia. That is such a beautiful church. It looked like a mosque because it's built in the style of the East, but it is not a mosque, it's a church, and it's still there in Istanbul. That is very beautiful. The Christian religion was the fundamental element of the existence of Constantinople. Constantinople was deeply Christian. The assumption of Christianity was a political maneuver to unify people under one cult. So, what was going on in the Byzantine Empire when Constantine was there? There were a lot, was the same problem that led to the division of the empire in two. Because the problem was that the Roman Empire was huge and it was not homogeneous. There were different people speaking different languages, different culture, different religion, and so on and so forth. This could be a problem. So Constantine wanted to unify the empire somehow. So how he did that? He decided to impose only one religion, Christianity. So Christianity was used politically as an element of unification, homogenization of the empire. So Constantine tried to unify all those different pagans with different religion. They have different deities under the religion of Christianity. So this is the way Christianity has been, let's say, used under a political point of view. Let's say this other concept. Constantinople stood in a suburb, and Constantine, so what that means that Constantinople stood in a suburb, what I said before, that the center of the empire was still Rome. Constantinople was really in a suburb. It wasn't the center of anything, especially because it didn't have the infrastructure that instead Rome in Italy could offer. So, in order to attract people, to make this city great like Rome, Constantine started to build the city in the same style of the Roman Empire, the same style that Rome has been built by the previous Roman emperors in Rome. Okay, so now I would like to talk a little bit about the religion. We talk a little bit about because it is important with Constantine and the Byzantine Empire. We have basically in Europe the passage from paganism to Christianity that then will last, will spread also toward Rome, and then will last for all the Middle Age very strongly and still today. So let's see what happened. And let's see also something that is good to know. The paganism, during this passage from paganism to Christianity, this passage hasn't been very clean. What I mean with that, that the pagan rituals mix it up with the Christian tradition, and still nowadays in Christianity we have some holidays that actually they were pagan. Pagan or pagan? I think I say pagan, I say pagan. So, for example, December 25th in the Christianity is considered the born of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was not born in December 25th. We don't know exactly when he was born, but he probably was born in the spring. So Jesus Christ was not born on December 25th. So Christmas, that is a tradition of the Christian religion, is not really is not really the birthday of Jesus Christ. Why December 25th is important? Because December 25th was a previous pagan festivity. December 25th corresponds to the winter solstice, and so is the birth of the god sun, because then the god sun renew and we enter in the new season, and then start the spring and the nature wake up. All the pagans rituals had a common denominator. They were all about fertility, okay? Fertility, the nature, especially the fertility of nature, because it was so important at that time to have the fertility of nature, not only for the fertility of people, but also in nature to produce food. It could make the difference between life and death. So that's why in the pagan rituals this concept of fertility is so important. And so the pagan rituals are all about the seasons and the solstice, the position of the sun. So 25th of December was the winter solstice, and it has nothing to do, I'm sorry to tell you, with the birthday of Jesus Christ. Okay, so these solstices that were typical of the pagan religions has been adopted in the Christianity. So now someone may ask, but why Christianity adopted all those pagan rituals? Is very simple. In his attempt to unify all the empire under the same religion, Constantine, in order to convince the pagans to become Christians, he has to give them some concessions. This is a difficult word for me. So what happened? Then Constantine, in order to convince the pagans to become Christians, allowed them to keep their holidays and their rituals. That's how those rituals then mix it up with the Christianity, and nowadays we have many Christians holidays that are not Christian at all, are pagan. In fact, here we read that Constantine wanted to unify the empire under only one religion. In order to convert the pagans to Christianity, allow them to keep their pagan rituals. Later on, those rituals will be adopted by Christian tradition, and they arrive until our days. So let's see some of them. One is Halloween. It's not difficult to understand that Halloween has very little to do with Christianity. I mean, Halloween, witches, and it's a very nice tradition, but it's definitely not Christian. So let's see the next one. I put some together. It's just nice to know. Okay, I said that Christmas is not the birthday of Jesus Christ, number one. Number two, a Christian, for Christmas there is the Christmas tree. The Christmas tree was a tradition that has been introduced by the barbarians that inhabit the lands in the north, and it has been introduced later on. This tradition of the pine, okay, the tree is a pine, is still related to the eternal life and life opposite to death. In fact, if you know, the pine is one of the few trees that never die. All the other trees in the winter lose their leaves, not the pine. The pine is always green. So that's the reason why there is this tradition. There was this tradition according to the pagans of the north, where they had a forest of pines, and they adores this tree as representing eternal life, because this tree never die. And that it was, of course, a northern barbarians tradition that being introduced in, of course, what a pine can have to do with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ lived in the Middle East. There were no pines there, so there were no those kind of trees. So obviously this is another pagan tradition that has been absorbed by Christianity. The eggs, another thing. What Jesus Christ has to do with the eggs? Absolutely nothing. In fact, the eggs is not clear, the origin of the eggs, but it's very clear what they represent. They represent fertility, because what better than egg can represent fertility? And in fact, these coincide with Easter. Easter is the moment when nature start to produce food, the animals reproduce. So it's obviously a ritual, an ancient pagan rituals related to fertility. Oh, the bunny. This is very cute, but bunny, I have no idea. I couldn't find no information about the bunny. Anyway, he has no anything to do with Jesus Christ, that for sure. And here I didn't find anything. The only thing I found is the Bugs Bunny. So okay, this is, I wanted to make it a little funny, because if you think about it, it's funny. All those Christians, they think those are Christians rituals. Well, they are not. So when Constantine died, the city grew so much that the only aqueduct was no longer sufficient. Constantine was successful in attracting all the people in Rome, and the city grew a lot, but at this point the city needed new infrastructure. In fact, there was only an aqueduct, and it was not sufficient to provide for all the citizens of Constantinople. In the 4th century, in the city of Constantinople, in the Byzantine Empire, they had to develop a network of aqueducts even wider than the one of Rome. Why he need to be wider? For one reason, that in Rome they have the river Tiber. In Constantinople there are no rivers. So in Constantinople there were no rivers. So the water had to be transported from far away over much longer distances than what happened in Rome. So the design of the new aqueduct began with Constantine, and it was completed by another emperor that was Valente. So let's see this emperor, that is 328, 378. So Valente built the longest network of aqueducts in the world. Was long 650 kilometers. And let's say he built two large aqueducts. One was called Corsu Lugerme, and it was 26 meters high. It's incredibly high. And also another aqueduct that took his name, it was the Valens aqueduct in Istanbul, in Constantinople, that now is Istanbul and is still there. And this Valens aqueduct is covered by Christians' religious symbols, and it was a kilometer long and supplied the water for all the city. Of course, the aqueducts of Rome in Italy had religious pagan symbols. Instead, now we see that they start to decorate the building and the construction with religious Christians symbols. Okay, let's see the Valente aqueduct in Istanbul. There is a small I put here some video that I found online really interesting, and I put them together. And there is still my voice, but I'm not recording in this moment. So if there is some discrepancy with what I'm saying, that's the reason. So let's see this video.
So this is one of the aqueduct. This is Corsu Logerne, is one of the aqueduct that has been built. This is the way they built the aqueducts, because at some point there was not enough water in Byzantium, so they have to build aqueduct like they used to do in ancient Rome's. So they use the same technique of construction. They build a structure in wood, and then they construct the arcs, and they took away the construction in wood only after they posted the key of volta. And they post also Christian symbols, no like the ancient Romans, they used pagan symbols. This time they were Christian symbols because Constantinople was Christian. This aqueduct is still there. It's called Valente Aqueduct, and this is the aqueduct in the city of Istanbul, and is enormous. Is height is 8 meters high, and is still there. It's very beautiful, by the way. So if you go to Istanbul, go to take a look.
Okay, so we saw this video of this beautiful aqueduct that is still in Istanbul. So the city architects, built more than 150 underground city cisterns to conserve the water. We said that in Constantinople there were no rivers, so they need somehow to store the water, okay, that arrive in the city. So they built more than 150 cisterns, and they were underground. It's unbelievable for those times. So let's see the biggest cistern, that was called Cistern Basilica, and it was the largest. He has a ceiling that is 8 meters high. He has 336 columns, is 140 meters long and 70 meters wide. It could hold 80,000 square meters of water. If I'm not wrong, 4 liters are 1 gallon, so 20,000 gallons. The cisterns were built in the valley between the hills. So by building them in between the hills, they fill up the environment, and then they have a flat place to build on top. But I have a video, a very interesting video, so it's going to see more visual. You can see very well what I mean.
So Byzantium wasn't large like Rome. They have less space, especially because there were a lot of hills. So they had to find a way to store the water. They built a lot. This is one of the cistern that have been built underground. This is his basilica. Cistern Basilica. It was enormous. We see the way it was built with a lot of columns, like we see, and this we can see here all these columns. In this graphic, they show that the cisterns were built underground. And on the top they can build other stuff, so they were underground.
So, okay, let's go on. At the end of the 5th century, the inhabitants were 500,000, and Constantinople had become a legendary place. So 500,000 is a lot. Not quite like Rome, because Rome arrived at 1 million. That is a really huge number for those time. You have to think that they didn't have the medicine, the hospital, and all the things that we have nowadays. But there is one specific reason why those cities grow so much for the number of inhabitants. Is because they had running water. So the condition of life get better. So Constantinople, we had 500,000 people. In 410 after Christ, Rome in Italy has been attacked by the Visigoths. Okay, they were barbarians. And happened what is called still today the sack of Rome. Thus, this fact thrown the whole empire into terror, because Rome, for the first time, hasn't been able to defend itself. So the Byzantines understood that they would have been next. So with the decline, so let's see what they did. Because of course happened to Rome is going to happen to them, especially because they are so rich that when a city is rich, attract people who want to steal. So with the decline of Rome in Italy, Constantinople became increasingly rich and powerful, and the barbarians people began to try to conquer it. They attract their attention. So Byzantium knew that they would have been next, and they also begin to be threatened pretty directly by the Huns. Huns are barbarians and whose king was the famous or infamous Attila. So I want to show, because the Byzantines understood they would have been next. So what they did, they built a wall. That's the reason why Constantinople resisted for so long to the attack of so many people, because they had a huge walls to protect them. So it's important for me to show you this map. Look Constantinople, okay? Is written in Italian, Costantinopoli. This is an Italian map that I found. So look on, it was in the middle of the sea, so it was very difficult to attack Constantinople coming from the sea, coming from east. So the only place where it could be attacked is by land on the west. But over there, at that borderline that you see, the Byzantines built a huge wall that protect them for centuries. So now let's see the Emperor Theodosius II, 401 450 after Christ, of course. To defend Constantinople, it was enough to fortify the western border. To defend Constantinople, it was enough to fortify the western border. That was the vulnerable part. I just show you, that's why I show you the map. So these walls are called the Theodosius walls because the name of the emperor that built them. And it was the largest defensive complex that was ever been built. Those walls, at some point we will see they have been partially destroyed by an earthquake, so the Byzantines rebuilt them again. After the second time they rebuilt them, these walls was second only to the Chinese wall that already existed. So the building of the walls the first time, before the earthquake, the buildings of the walls began when Theodosius, this emperor, was only 12. Actually, the real mind of the project was the prefect Artemi, that he was the regent of the kingdom until the emperor was too young to rule. So the Byzantines inherited the construction technique of the Romans that were very good, but they had further difficulties, like I said, that Constantinople arose in a seismic area. So basically they changed the composition of the pozzolana. Pozzolana, if you remember, was a material that the Romans used to make concrete that was extremely strong, and it was made with the cinder, with the ash of the volcans. So these Byzantine, I think they add lime or they add something else that make it a little bit more flexible, so to absorb the seismic waves typical of this area of Constantinople. But it wasn't enough because I told you that at some point we have an earthquake that destroyed partially the Theodosius walls. So let's see the Theodosian walls. These walls was high 9 meters, and it was 5 meters thick. Can you imagine a wall that is 5 meters thick? Whoa! And it was stones. It was just stone, solid stone. So the Huns, that were the one who wanted to conquer Constantinople at this time, the Huns were excellent horse fighters, and they also knew the use of stirrups. That's what made them good. They made raids from China to India to Europe, and Attila was the king of the Huns. Okay, here I have a video that I want to show you that is very beautiful about the Theodosian walls. Let's see the video.
So those are the Theodosian walls that have been built when Theodosian was a child, was 12 years old, like we saw. And they were very strong, and they protect Constantinople for some years. But at some point there was an earthquake, like we saw, and they have been destroyed. This was the opportunity for Attila and the Huns to conquer Constantinople. So Theodosian is famous because he asked his people to rebuild them. All people in Constantinople rebuild them, and they built 3 walls. This time you can see is not only one, they are three. So there was a first part, you see, with the water. Then there was a second part, the first wall that was large, 2 meters, and three walls plus all the towers. That's what makes Constantinople impossible to conquer. For many, many centuries, it was impossible to go through these walls.
So if you go to vacation to Turkey, you have to go to see these walls. They are still there, standing. Um, Something that I want to say again because it's very important. Previously, all the buildings in Rome and here too has been built by the slaves. Not these walls. After the earthquake that happened during the reign of Theodosius, it happened during his reign, they have to be fast to rebuild them because they were scared that Attila would take the opportunity to go there and conquer the city. But thanks God the communication were not very fast, so the news of the earthquake that destroyed partially the walls took a while to arrive to Attila, and then Attila of course ran there, but the Byzantines built the walls on time. Anyway, they have to be fast because they didn't know when the enemy could conquer the city. The fact that the walls of Constantinople have been partially destroyed by an earthquake poses a big risk to the city. So this is the first time that a big construction has not been built by the slaves. It has been built by the slaves, but also by the free citizens of Constantinople. Why? Because it was in their interest. Everybody worked at the construction of these walls under the request of the emperor. The emperor Theodosius asked to his citizen to help to build the walls, and all the citizens of Constantinople and the slaves worked together as fastest as they can, as fastest as they could, and they finished the walls on time. The walls were rebuilt in 3 defensive lines. The city became impregnable. This wall was only inferior to the Chinese wall, that it was longer. They built three walls, right? They rebuilt 3 walls. Instead, before the earthquake, there was only one. The most internal of those 3 walls was the original, okay, the one that has been partially destroyed. So think about how difficult it was to impregnate the city, because there was the first was the moat, there was a moat, then there were 3 walls that, like we said, they were 8 meters high and 5 meters thick. They were made on solid stone. And also there were the towers. The towers were packed with soldiers, and they were like little castles. They should have also to conquer all the towers one by one. It was impossible. In fact, that's the reason why Constantinople stands there for more than 1,000 years, as rich and wealthy he was, that everybody wanted to conquer, but nobody succeeded, thanks to those walls. When Attila arrived and he saw the new walls, he gave up. Many tried to conquer the city without succeeding. The Huns, the Arabs, the Russians, the Persians, the Turks, all failed. Also, the Byzantine protected the city also on the side of the sea. In fact, in the sea, in order to protect the port, they built a gigantic chain that closed the port in order to make the city impregnable, even also from the sea. Also. This chain it was 5 meters long, 500, 500 meters long, and he had 650 rings of 60 centimeters each, and it was built in iron. Okay, this is just a map that show this chain, that basically the chain was on the soil, okay, underwater, so the boats could enter in the port of Constantinople. And then there was a system that they pull the chain with some machinery in wood that they build. They pull the chain rise up out of the water, and it close the entrance to the port. This is a particular of the beautiful church of Saint Sophia that we will talk about it in a little bit. He has been built by Justinian and Theodora. So all trades between the west and the east passed through Constantinople because of its incredibly strategical position. So the immense flow of wealth that flowed into the city began to attract many enemies, of course, who looted the surrounding territories. The empire was reduced. Why? Because the wall protect only the city. At the death of Theodosius II, the one who built the walls, in 450 after Christ, the Byzantines lost control over the Mediterranean Sea. And in the 5th centuries, the empire crumbled because of the invasions of the barbarians. In the 476 after Christ, Romulus Augustus is deposed, and that ends the Roman Empire of the West. So it's good to remember that the Roman Empire of the West officially ends when the last emperor, Romulus Augustus, is deposed, and we talk about that in the previous lesson, number 3. Now let's see this emperor, Justinian I, 483-565. So this emperor tried to reconquer the Roman Empire. He put order in the Roman legislative code. He married Theodora, that was of humble origins, but it turned out to be a great empress. And Justinian and Theodora ruled together with equal powers. Justinian tried to reunify the Western Roman Empire and wanted to enlarge Constantinople by imposing many taxes that make him unpopular. So Justinian had this dream to reconquer the Roman Empire. He succeeded only partially. It was just too difficult. And he wanted to make Constantinople even bigger. So in order to get the money to do all that, he has to impose a lot of taxes. Of course, taxes making unpopular. There were many reasons. This emperor is not remembered for that. He's remembered for his big construction. He built the Church of Santa Sofia, that is still today in Istanbul, that is very beautiful. But anyway, even if this emperor is not remembered for the bloody acts that he commit, he was bloodthirsty, especially because he was hated. People never liked him for different reasons. One was the imposition of very high taxes. Also, this emperor was strictly Christian and a Puritan. Okay, so he wanted to suppress in a violent way all the pagan celebration, and he also suppressed the study of the Greek philosophers. He prohibited gambling, he prohibited prostitution, he prohibited adultery, he prohibited homosexuality, and he persecuted all the people who did those things, and he also persecuted the non-Orthodox Christian, and he persecuted the Jew. Because of all these actions, he was extremely hated, he was unpopular, and people hated him. Let's talk a little bit about the hippodrome. I think you say hippo or hippodrome? Hippodrome. So hippodrome was this construction. You know, Romans always liked the games. You know, the Romans in Rome had the Colosseum previously. So those people are no exception. Those people are the descendant of the Romans. They are Romans. And so they like that as well. It was also a tradition inside the Roman Empire. And here we have the hippodrome. The hippodrome is a place where particularly run the horses. The horses run against each other, and people bet money on that. So that's what it was. The hippodrome in Constantinople was huge. Here you can see some reconstruction at the computer, because I think it's destroyed almost all, but it was absolutely huge. Here remind me a little bit of the Circus Maximum that existed in Rome previous the Colosseum. He had a similar structure. Okay, let's talk about the Nicca revolt, that it was very bloody. When the citizen of Rome went to the Colosseum in Rome, and the same here with the hippodrome, it was free. Everyone has access to the games for free. And the emperor sit in his position, and the citizen could see the emperor by their the way they were inside the hippodrome. So Nicca revolt is called Nicca because people were screaming in Greek, Nicca, Nicca, Nicca. Nicca means we will win. So let's see what happened about this. It's a kind of, I will call it more a civil war. So in the 532, in the hippodrome of Constantinople, the crowd opposed the emperor that was not popular. We are talking about Justinian, and began to shoot at him. They began shooting at him, and especially they shot Nicca, Nicca, Nicca. We will win against you. So that's why this civil war, it was a civil war, has been called the Nicca Civil War. Nicca is a Greek expression. So the people, after this event, that was the protest that made the emotion, the events and the revolt, the people began a revolt in the street of the city. That revolt lasted 3 days and destroyed 3/4 of the city. Justinian was scared. He was ready to flee into exile, fearing for his life. But Theodora, who was a great strategist, persuaded him to stay. Justinian listened to her, and then he gathered the crowd of the rioters, of the rebels in the hippodrome with the excuse that he wanted to talk to them and possibly give them some concessions. It was an excuse because instead Justinian, when all the rebels were inside the hippodrome, closed the doors of the hippodrome and he ordered to his army to kill them all. Were 30,000 rebels. They all have been killed. It has been a massacre. Even though Justinian did this, and it was a kind of, it could be ruthless. Justinian has not been remembered. He didn't went down in history because of those acts of violence. He went down in history because of the beautiful construction that he did. So he built the church of Saint Sophia. That look, this is a picture. It looks like a mosque, but it's not, and it's still in Constantinople. Here another picture. And look at the obelisk at the top. It's huge. So let's see what Justinian built. He built the Church of Saint Sophia that is being built by Isidore and Artemis. Isidore and Artemis are two architects. They were two famous architects. The dome of this church is 30 meters in diameter and it was 56 meters high, 9 meters taller than the Statue of the Liberty in New York. So this construction has been begun in 531 and it was terminated in 537. The dome later on collapsed 20 years later because of an earthquake. We saw that in this area. This area is seismic. There are some earthquakes from time to time. So this time, the architect Isidore the Young, that he was the son of the previous architect who built the church before he crumbled, rebuilt it. And the dome was now built narrowest and highest, 6 meter highest and narrowest to make it more stable. In fact, now it's still there today. And it was decorated, this beautiful church, with the monograms of Justinian and Theodora. Let's see the maximum extension of the Justinian Empire. Justinian wanted to reunify the Roman Empire. He succeeded partially. The problem is that it didn't last. Let's talk a little bit about the cost of all this. The cost for the continuous military campaign in order to reunify the Roman Empire and also the cost for the constructions in Constantinople dried up the coffers of the state. So you may wonder why. If you remember in the previous lesson we talked about the fact that Rome, we are talking about Rome in the West, was very expansionistic for a reason, because every time they conquered new land and they subjugated new people, they became rich because they stole all the riches from the people that they subjugated. Not only that, but the army that they won against were taken as slaves, and slaves that produce free labor, and they were very expensive. They sold them and buy them like a merchandise, produce a lot of income also. But so you may ask, but why Justinian, when he conquered back the lands back to the Roman Empire, didn't become rich by doing the same? Still, the riches of the population and make the soldiers slaves, because those new population that were occupying those land that Justinian tried to take back were barbarians. Okay, the barbarians were nomads. They were nomads. They were not stable in a land. They move continuously, and they were excellent in riding horses. So the fact that they were nomads it means that they didn't possess riches, so there were no much to steal. Also, the second font of source of income to make them slave was not possible as well, because they were excellent to riding horse and they were very fast to run away. So even if Justinian was able to take back the lands, he couldn't get any money, any riches out of that. That's the reason why he kind of almost bankrupt the empire. In the following 3 centuries, the empire lost many territories, but the capital remained impossible to conquer. The capital remained impossible to conquer because of the Theodosian Wars. But, like I said, those conquests that Justinian did to get back, it was his dream to get back to the ancient splendor of the Roman Empire. But unfortunately, even if succeeded partially, it did not last. Let's see this emperor. His name was Basil II, 958 until a little bit after the years 1025. We are in the middle of the High Middle Age in Europe. Actually, in Europe, we are already after the time of Charlemagne, or Karl Lemagne. It's Carlo Magno in Italian. I don't know in English. I think Karl Lemagne. Karl Lemagne, he has became emperor in the region that now is France, Gallia, in the 800. Okay, and we had the same pope, the first pope in Europe around the 300, I think. But in Europe already got rid of the Muslims that tried to conquer Europe, because Charles Martel, the father of Charlemagne, sent them away. And Europe now is going very, very fast toward the Renaissance. Let's come back here in the East. In the 10th century, the Byzantine expanded militarily thanks to the new military techniques, and also thanks to the military skills of this warrior king, that it was Basil II. He was a very skillful leader and a strategist. He was conducting the military campaigns personally, and he was of humble origins. He was a good ruler, firm but just, even if, like all the other kings or emperors, could be ruthless. So let's see who is Samuel. Samuel is the Tsar of the Bulgarian kingdom, and he was the enemy of Basil. Why? Because they were competitor, but they were both interested in the conquest of the Balkans. They both wanted to control the Balkans. In the 986, Basilio suffered a heavy defeat at the hands of the Tsar army. So Basilio vowed to take revenge and for many years conquer of the land of Samuel, one after another one. The Byzantines introduced the use of the trabocco. Trabocco is one of the many military inventions, and it was like a giant slingshot that could throw stones that were even they were 200 kilograms, so it was very destructive. Also, the soldiers of Basil were trained in an exemplary manner. They were trained very well. So, in the year 1001, Basilio attacked the Bulgarian kingdom after he destroyed all its infrastructures in the previous years, damaging the economy of the Bulgarian kingdom. Okay, basically what happened, that Basilio for many years, attacked and destroyed all the infrastructure of the Bulgarian kingdom in order to make it weaker and weaker progressively. This is a very common military tactic of ancient times. And then, so he waited a lot to have his revenge. In fact, on July 29, 1025, Basilio finally destroyed Samuel's army with a surprise attack, and he captured 14,000 soldiers. And what he did, he made them all blind. He left one man with one eye every 100 men. All the others were blind. And why he left one man with one eye every 100? To bring back the others to the Tsar. So when Samuel saw his army reduced that way, he fell ill and he died shortly thereafter. The soldiers also became a huge social cost. Basilio gained control over the Balkans, and he was called the Bulgarians' exterminator. Basil died a few years later, leaving the Byzantine at the height of their power. But the empire remained without a king, and it was tormented by internal strife. It basically followed the same history of Rome in the West. People start to fight continuously for the power. It's happening here as well. Let's see the siege of Constantinople that happened pretty much 400 years later. In 1453, we have the siege of Constantinople, and Constantinople finally fell. In 1453, the Ottomans Empire are the Turks. Basically, they were Muslims. They have been sent away from Europe by the father of Karl Le Magne, that was Carlo Martello, and thanks God, because that saved Europe. But here, they were not able to do so. So in the 1453, finally, the Ottomans Empire attacked Constantinople. Why they were able to take Constantinople in despite of those big walls? Because of a new technological advancement in the technique of military technique, of the art of war, if you want to call it this way. They invented the gunpowder. If they didn't invent the gunpowder, those walls and Constantinople would be still there. So the Ottomans attacked Constantinople in the 1453 with the cannons and gunpowder. So only that way they were able to destroy the impenetrable walls and conquer Constantinople. After the Ottomans conquered Constantinople, they renamed it Istanbul, and Istanbul nowadays is still there as capital of Turkey. So that was the end of the Byzantine Empire, and I hope you enjoyed those 4 lessons. Thanks for listening.